What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today we're looking at the top 8 deck lists from Toronto Regionals that occurred this past weekend, and it had over 1,000 Masters Divisions players. We are absent of Christian Labella's Arceus Duraludon list, but I've pulled up an Arceus Duraludon list from the Latin America Internationals in lieu of this one, in case anybody watching this video really wanted to see an Arceus Duraludon deck list, but we have all the others, and I think the others are really interesting to review and talk about today. Before we get into all of that, though, shout out to my wonderful sponsors, PotownStore.com, PokemonCard.io, Beast Coast Pokemon, and Dragon Shield Sleeves. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for daily Pokemon TCG content, and let's get into this. And we will start with that Arceus Duraludon list. So this is from Leonardo. He got 21st at the Sao Paulo Internationals. This is a recent Arceus Duraludon list in this format. So it has notable things for this format, like the two big Parasols and the Serena, which would have been absent in previous Arceus Duraludon lists. So there's your sample Arceus Duraludon list, so I don't leave you guys hanging on that. Let's begin here for the top 8 with Charlie Lockyer's top 8 Articuno Inteleon deck. This was such a cool deck to see on stream, and one of the coolest things about it is that it uses Radiant Alakazam as its Radiant Pokemon. So let's talk about this deck. So we've got Articuno. The Articuno does Wild Freeze, 70 damage, plus 50 to itself, and your opponent's active is now paralyzed. So that's really good against Lugia VSTAR decks, because Lugia VSTAR decks are typically playing zero waste switch. Some of them were teching in like one Bird Keeper or one Charon. Or when we get to Isaiah Bradner's list, you'll see his group teched Espeon VMAX to prevent effects of attacks affecting the Pokemon. But Wild Freeze was going to take advantage of most Lugia V-Star decks in the field not being able to switch out of paralysis. And then the Wild Freeze does do 50 damage to itself, but they were playing 3 Emergency Jellies, which says at the end of the turn, this Pokemon this card is attached to has 30 HP or less, heal 120 from it, then discard. So that's really good, because you can use Wild Freeze and then attach Emergency Jelly, use Wild Freeze again, then it fully heals you. And then you can use Wild Freeze 3 more times before knocking yourself out, or 2 more with an Emergency Jelly and reset it again. So Articuno Wild Freeze Emergency Jelly was a tactic that several players kind of got a hold of for this weekend, and Charlie was one of the players fortunate enough to succeed with this strategy. But that's not all, because the Sobble Drizzle Inteleon line is going to be important for searching out trainers, but the Aquabolt Inteleon is also a really good attacker. Doing 120 and then 20 to the bench can set up some good numbers. And then you have the quick shooting Inteleon as well. And then Radiant Alakazam to put 2 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another of their Pokemon. So you can move damage from that Pokemon that you're paralyzing in the active and start setting up knockouts on the bench. It's really cool. It reminds me of Stallflygon from 2009 format, where you could trap a Pokemon in the active and just move counters off of it, taking knockouts elsewhere. Also, there's also been some Dusknoir decks like that in the past, because Dusknoir has a lot of damage moving counter abilities. So other techs in here include the Ice Cube Block Face doing 70 and then prevent all damage done by attacks from basic Pokemon. So you can just auto a Lost Box deck with this, because you can attach Wash Water and then use Block Face, and they can't do damage to you because of Block Face, and they can't do effects to you because of Wash Water energy. So things like Sableye Lost Mine, Giratina's Star Requiem, those won't affect Manaphy. But I don't even know why I just mentioned Giratina V-Star, because Giratina could just attack it regular, since it's not a basic Pokemon when it's a V-Star. So, but for that example, those are effects of attacks. And then also 2 Drapion V to take care of Mew VMAX decks, and coincidentally Mewtwo V Union decks, but it looks like Charlie did not get to play against Piper in top 8 and use that Drapion V. I do not think, at least. I don't think that they were the pairing. I could be wrong. I'm not sure of the pairings, but I would suspect that the Drapion Vs would have been very good against Piper's deck if they did end up playing. Next, we have Grant Manley and Caleb Gedimer in 7th and 3rd playing the same exact list. We'll just look at Caleb's here, or Grant's here. It doesn't matter. Grant and Caleb had the same list, but so this is 7th place Grant technically. Also, this deck only costs $30 to build. That's really funny, and it got 3rd, 7th, top 16, and top 32, same 60. So let's open this one up. There's a lot going on here. We've got Snorlax with Thumping Snore, does 180, very good. Also, Unfazed Fat prevents effects of attack, so it doesn't get paralyzed, which is pretty cool. Zekrom, Wild Shock, does 130, and it does 60 damage to itself, but it also paralyzes the opponent's Pokemon, so it's very similar to the Articuno that was also a popular tech this weekend. Zekrom, a little less popular, but still around as a tech for paralyzing Lugia V-Stars. Then you got your normal guys. You got Sableye, you got Cramorant, you got Radiant Greninja, and then Kyogre has been finding its way into these Mirage Gate decks pretty frequently now for that big wombo turn when you discard the top 5 cards of your deck, and then you do 250 damage to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon because you're going to energy recycler a 0-card deck into a 5-card deck full of basic energies, and you win the game there. Then we've got Jake Gearhart with Palkia, Inteleon, Articuno. This is one of the coolest decks to come out of the weekend because Jake was very adamant that you could just adapt your old decks to beat the metagame. And I agree with Jake because, like I wrote in my little metagaming blurb prior to the weekend, very rarely does a indisputable tier 1 deck like Palkia and Inteleon just become trash just like that with the release of one set. Very rarely does that happen. And that's something to learn. You know, if your deck was considered best deck in format potential just a few weeks ago, it probably is still pretty good. That's the general way it goes in the Pokemon trading card game. There are some times when a deck will have a very hard drop-off rate, but you'll see this happen a lot. Like when Palkia and Inteleon came out and everybody declared that Arceus and Inteleon was dead, and it wasn't. Or, you know, when Drapion V comes out and everybody declares that Mew VMAX is dead, things like that. It rarely is so black and white that the old tier 1 deck is just like tier 5 now. That hardly ever happens. And Jake proved that well here. Really like the Thornton inclusion since you're only playing a 2/2 Palkia V-Star line, but he's playing that Articuno and the Emergency Jelly. Also Lost City to deal with some of the single prize decks. Excuse me, to deal with the single prize decks like Regigigas and Lost Zone Box, Drapion V to deal with the Mew VMAXs. But Articuno mostly to deal with the Lugia decks, of course. I really like the Thornton in here. Of course, the Emergency Jelly works really nice with Articuno as well. And next we have 2 Lugia decks. So we have Kieran and Isaiah. Let's check out Isaiah Bradner's first here. So Isaiah's group did play that 1/1 SB on VMAX, which has the ability Solar Revelation, prevent all effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to all of your Pokemon that have energy attached. But it does not remove existing effects. So as long as you have that Espeon VMAX in play, your Pokemon with energy, like a Lugia V-Star, can't be paralyzed. They can't be instant knocked out by an Amazing Destruction. They can't have damage counters placed on them by Lost Mine. So Espeon VMAX does stop a fair bit of popular effects that are going around in the game right now. We'll see that they cut all stadiums, so they played 0 stadiums in this deck. A very heavy Pokemon deck. You'll see, like, not that many, not a large diversity of trainer cards. Also cutting down to just 2 Lugia VSTAR, since this is really like a box style deck. You're going to attack with like 1 Lugia, and then you want to clean up with Radiant Zard and Evoltal. Against single prizes, you'll attack with Stoutland. Luminion's also a good attacker. So I like this deck. They were thinking ahead of the game with the Espeon VMAX, knowing that there would be some kind of paralysis stuff happening this weekend, trying to take advantage of that absence of switching cards in Lugia V-Star. And it paid off. Isaiah got top 8, not the finish he wanted, I know, because he went into top 8 as first seed, so definitely looking for something a little better than 5th, but 5th is still really, really great. Then going over to Kieran's deck, this was only a 3-2 line of Lugia V-Star. But also playing 2 Collapse Stadium, Birdkeeper, pretty different than Isaiah's deck. So you have 2 really different Lugia V-Star lists to look at here. This one's using the Thumping Snore Snorlax as a strong single prize attacker. And yeah, also, like I mentioned, playing the 2 Collapse Stadiums, as where Bradner's list played 0 stadiums. We've got Caleb with the Lost Box, which we already saw because Grant, Caleb, Azul, and Danny all played the same deck. Arceus Duraludon, currently we do not have the list for that, but we did look at a different Arceus Duraludon list. And then Piper Lapine won the entire event with Mewtwo v Union Control. So using the Cry of Destruction Evoltal to remove energies, the Miltank to create a wall that Pokemon V can't swing through, Snorlax as your draw engine, you leave it in the active and draw some cards, and then the end game plan is to create this Mewtwo V Union with 310 HP that has damage reduced via Radiant Gardevoir and V-Guard energy. And you can, well, we'll have to click on all of the Mewtwo pieces. We've got Super Regeneration that heals 200 damage. So if the opponent can only do 200 damage or less a turn, you can just infinitely heal this Mewtwo V Union. If they can do a little more than that, like Duraludon's 220, they can do 220, you heal 200, 220, you heal 200, 220, you heal 200, but 60 left over. And so on that turn, you use Pokemon Center Lady to heal that leftover 60. Since Duraludon VMAX does go through Radiant Gardevoir and V-Guard energy. So even if they're doing more than 200, you still have outs with Pokemon Center Lady. And then you have Psysplosion to put 16 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. This can take multi-prize turns against Lost Zone decks. Also against Sobble, Drizzile, and Teleon engine decks, it can be very good. And then, of course, the final attack is Final Burn. It just does a flat 300. Who doesn't love that? And Photon Barrier prevents all effects done to this Mewtwo. So it can't be paralyzed. It can't be insta-knocked out. It can't have damage counters placed on it. That Photon Barrier makes it really, really tanky and impenetrable by most things. And Path to the Peak was very, very underplayed this weekend, so Mewtwo V Union was pretty safe from Path to the Peak this weekend, in my opinion. So those were the top 8 decks and players from the Toronto Regionals. Lugia did not win. We had Mewtwo winning, Arceus Duraludon getting 2nd, Losso Mirage Gates getting 3rd, Lugia getting 4th and 5th, Palkia and Inteleon 6th, Losso Mirage Gates 7, and Inteleon Articuno in 8th place. Tell me what you expected, what you didn't expect, and where you think the metagame goes from here. I think it's pretty obvious that Lugia is not unbeatable because it got 4th and 5th. It didn't get 1st and 2nd this time. I think this is a really nice little metagame shaping up here. We've got plenty of different decks to choose from. Cheap, expensive, easy to play, hard to play. aggro, control, somewhere in the middle with a toolbox feel, even the inventive decks like Articuno that were previously not an archetype. So I'm excited to see where this is going, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.